Awesome, let's now talk about the new products or startups. This is probably the most exciting part of the class and honestly the most complex part because managing a new product and managing a startup is more of an art than a science, and there is no consensus on what's the most important things and what you need to do to succeed, while there is still some opinions on what is critically important to do right, because if you do those things wrong, the chance of success will be pretty negligent. And let us start with just making it an explicit statement that new products and startups in general are pretty hard. And if you're thinking about going into startup versus joining like a growth company or mature product company, you need to think twice or maybe even 3 times, because again, startups are really, really hard. And lots of smart people talk about this. I'm giving you 2 links in this class. One is Paul Graham from Y Combinator, and one is Mark Andreessen. Each of them talks about how difficult startups are, and like each of them gives you more than 10 reasons of why not do a startup. So I would just suggest that you read those articles and like pretty carefully, and you make decision for yourself whether you're ready for this type of an emotional roller coaster and like 0 free time and like lots of other responsibilities and commitments you need to be able to dive into while you take startup risk. Now that you made a decision to start a company or join an early stage startup or to start managing a new product, let's discuss what is important. So what do you need to be focused on, and where do you critically need to succeed? There is again wide range of topics which are important. I will be just talking about several of them which I believe are of critical importance. And the first one is talking to customers. So some people call it doing things which do not scale. There is many definitions, but basically it's all about learning how to reduce the amount of risk you're taking. Many people believe startups and startup founders are about taking success. In fact, it's a better way to believe that startups and startup founders are becoming successful only when they can eliminate success and focus on what's important while diversifying and removing every bit of uncertainty which is possible. So the best way I'm aware of doing this is actually talking to your customers. And the person I really trust previously told me that like before you talk to 100 customers, you can assume that you know nothing about the products and the space and the market you're in. So just go talk to your customers, take the notepad, take the pen and paper, and just listen and write. Just talk, listen, and write. This is critically important. Then the same kind of concept, but it's maybe a little bit more general, is like doing things which do not scale. In many cases, founders and startup employees and product managers believe they need to only do things which can be done on a scale, such as, for instance, how can I talk to 1 million customers at the same time? It is impossible. Okay, let me not talk to customers because it's not sustainable. So this logic, I really want to emphasize, this logic is wrong and false. You should not follow this logic. It is critically important for you to engage in things which do not scale, but are critically important at this particular life stage of your company. And talking to customers is just one perfect example, which you absolutely need to be doing as much as possible every single day. Now that we covered a critical importance of doing things which do not scale, and in particular talking to customers, let's talk about storytelling for a little bit. Like, what is storytelling and why is it important? First of all, when you do a startup, when you do a new product, in many cases it's really not obvious to other people what it does and how is it valuable to me, and like why should I even care? Why should I even sign up? So it's pretty common. It is pretty wide consensus by now that it's critically important for you to tell a story, to not just explain this is what we're doing, this is what our product does, but to always have a consistent and engaging story behind your product for different kinds of stakeholders. You need to have a story for your customers, you need to have a story for your investors, and you need to have a story for your employees. This is how you engage them, this is how you deliver the message, and this is how you make yourself more likely to succeed. Without the story, your probability of success is probably going to be way, way lower. So please do spend time and effort defining the story and crafting your story in a very convincing, engaging way. Okay, so now before we start talking about success formula for new product, let us spend some time talking about the concept of lean and minimum viable product. And I decided to speak about them because, again, it's becoming a pretty predominant school of thought about managing new products and startups, and sometimes those concepts seem pretty mysterious to people. What does it even mean? What does lean product mean, and what is minimum viable product? Basically, again, on a high level, and I will send you to Eric Ries's original paper for more details, but on a very high level, the lean philosophy and methodology is just about eliminating risk as inexpensively as possible, just making sure that you can get to certainty the fastest, the most efficient way. What is meant by this is Like, one good way to demonstrate that is to build minimum viable products whenever is possible. And one of the most critical concepts in lean startup is minimum viable product. Let's talk about this. What does it even mean? Minimum viable product, first of all, it needs to be viable, right? It's a key word. Minimum is actually not as critical as viable. The product needs to deliver on some customer expectations. The product needs to be able to solve a problem that customers have. If your product does not solve the problem, if your customers are not happy about your product is not viable. So do make your product viable. And now, minimum, like once you know that your product is viable, always challenge every single assumption in getting to this product. Like, is this particular feature important for me to keep this product viable? What's going to happen if I remove this? What's going to happen if I not do this? So always have this mindset. You always need to be thinking in absolute minimum terms to satisfy the minimum requirement that makes products viable. Minimum is key. If you build something more than minimum, you are less efficient than you should, and again, you will be less successful. Your probability of success will be lower. Now that we're all agreed that startups are hard, and we talked a little bit about what's important for startups in particular, talking to customers, telling a story, and building your product in a lean way, let's discuss the success formula. So what makes a startup successful and how do you succeed? Again, my way of looking at this is not the only right way, but I really like the framework by Marc Andreessen, and I would like to talk about 4 key definitions, 4 key factors of success, which you can multiply by each other to make it a success formula, and those will be market is number 1, product is number 2, team is number 3, and luck is number 4. So let's talk about each of them one by one. One is market. Marc Andreessen believes this is by far the most important factor for startup success or failure, and I tend to agree. Like, why is that? And what is the market? Market is basically the total amount of the need or total pain that the problem is trying to solve. In simple terms, business people usually define market in dollars, and it would be like the typical definition of a market for product or service would be what's the total amount of money the customers pay in aggregate worldwide for this product or service in this particular year. But you can generalize. You can always think about the market as a need or pain. It does not have to be measured in money. It just needs to exist, and it needs to be a problem that you are solving to people. So this is the market. You need to always be able to size the market before you dive into your company, and you need to go for as big of a market as possible to maximize the chances of your success. So to succeed with a new product, it is critically important that you always size the market and you always try to define market in a way that makes it as big as possible. This way, the chance of success will be bigger. Now that we talked about market, let's talk a little bit about the team, because it's another critical factor to startup success. What's the success criteria for the team, and what kind of team that makes startups successful? It's very, very complex topic again, but there is several observations which I want to share with you, and those observations also come from very successful people such as Paul Graham, Marc Andreessen, and Sam Altman. So there is pretty wide consensus on what to do with the team and what mistakes not to make. So number 1 advice is always try to have a co-founder. Do not go into startup alone. And again, startups are hard. We just talked about this. And in general, having a co-founder makes it way more likely for you to raise funds, to build better product, and to be successful. Why? There may be lots of reasons. One reason is when you're doing something not alone, it means that there is someone else who bought into your idea. The chance of 2 people being crazy about the same thing at the same time are way smaller than the chances of 1 person being crazy. And honestly, just having someone getting it into you makes your idea and your approach and your venture way more attractive and way more attractive to the outsider, to investor, and to a customer. Second, once you decided that you want a co-founder, do choose your co-founder very carefully. It is critically important. Sometimes people spend a lot of time and effort to recruit their employees, but they just sometimes select a co-founder from some random party. Hey, do you want to start a company? Let's start a company. This is something you should not be doing. This sometimes works, but more frequently it does not. You really need to know the person really well that you start company with. You need to be able to relate to some common topics or problems or interests, because startups will, again, they're hard. There will be really difficult period in your relationships, and if it's just a random person next to you, the chance of success is going down. Finally, that we discussed that you need a co-founder and you need to be very selective with a co-founder. Try to identify any conflicts and try to resolve them as early as possible. So this is the 3rd key advice on the team. And why is it important? Conflicts are unavoidable. The longer you wait, the more the conflict escalates and the more likely the conflict is to kill your company and kill your startup and kill your product. So please try to identify them as early as you can and resolve them as early as you can. And the extension of the same logic would be to basically fire employees that did not work out early on, right? Like, you need to identify the fact that things are not working out early and fix, however painful it is, fix the problem right now. Otherwise, your chances of success will go down. This covers our team topic. Now let's talk about product. This whole class is about product. So I feel like we already have talked quite a bit about it, but let's make several key concluding remarks. What makes product successful and what you should be paying attention to while developing a new product. And let me refer you to the article on LinkedIn by Jeff Winner, which was called "What Makes Truly Great Products." I completely agree to all the 5 attributes of successful products in this article, and I'm just going to cover each of them here. First, the product must be able to deliver on some single unique value proposition. It does not have to be one, but the product needs to be able to do at least one thing really well. Something that does 5 things mediocre is probably not a successful product. You better focus on one thing and do it really, really well. That's item number 1. Item number 2 is the product needs to be simple and intuitive to use to be successful. If you look at all the successful products you know, they're all intuitive and simple to use. That's self-explanatory. Third thing is the product needs to exceed expectations. This is a pretty deep concept, but what it means is sometimes product may be rough, but still can work out really well when there is such a big need and such a big pain which is not being solved by anyone else. So if expectations are pretty low and you build a relatively rough kind of product which is still not polished, you still may succeed. But in some other cases, when the expectations are very, very high and the customer have lots of alternatives, even if you build a very, very good product and very strong product, you may not succeed because expectations are not met. Successful product must always exceed expectations. Number 4, the product emotionally resonates with the customer. This one is a trickier, and honestly, I'm not confident that every successful product does emotionally resonate, but if your product does emotionally resonate with the customer, it is more likely to succeed. Finally, now that we talked about the market, the team, and the product, let's spend a minute talking about luck. Luck is the most mysterious concept, and I'm not going to give you my opinions. I'm just going to give you a link to, again, a very nice book and advice by Marc Andreessen, which I use today as my framework for luck. This book is called Chase, Chance, and Creativity, and the book is by Dr. James Austin, and the reference to this book you can find in a post by Marc Andreessen on Luck and Entrepreneur, the 4 kinds of luck. Basically, there are 4 kinds of chance or luck. Luck number 1 is a purely stochastic. It's just a random, like, you may get $100 today or you may not. It does not depend on you, it's just luck. The luck number 2 is something that depends on your effort. So for instance, when you wake up early and go to work early, you're more likely to find $100 just because I have not been able to pick it up before you. So this is just effort component. The luck number 3 is it adds to effort some knowledge, right? So for instance, when I go to work, I take certain route which is more likely to yield me $100 just because, again, I know that there is a bar on this route and people, for instance, may have lost $100 the previous night. Finally, the 4th kind of luck is the most complex and probably the most interesting concept, and it's luck which is very specific and particular to you and your interests. So when you learn certain things in your life and when you care about certain things, you start attracting some kind of people to yourself, and you start attracting certain kind of luck which is otherwise not available to people who do not apply this effort and who do not have those interests. So those are the 4 kinds of luck you can think of, and while some of those are not in your control, some of those are well in your control, so you should be able to optimize on luck as well.